Welcome back to the channel. Today we'll be taking a look at the 12 motorcycles that will be dirt cheap by spring. Number 12, Honda Shadow Phantom. The Honda Shadow Phantom is set to become one of those motorcycles that quietly slips into dirt cheap territory by spring 2026. It has been around long enough to lose the hype but not the respect, and that is exactly why prices are expected to fall hard. Clean used examples are already softening, and once spring inventory builds up, sellers will be forced to move them fast. What sits close to $11,000 today is likely to drift toward the low $9,000 range, sometimes even less depending on miles and condition. This bike has a calm, grounded feel that makes every ride easy and familiar. It does not try to impress with flashy tech or aggressive design choices. Instead, it feels honest and predictable, which is why many owners hold onto them for years. That long ownership cycle is now turning into a steady flow of listings, pushing prices down even more. When supply grows and demand cools, the value drops quickly, and the Shadow Phantom fits that pattern perfectly. Another reason it will get cheap is how well it ages. The styling does not scream any specific year, so buyers do not feel pressure to pay extra for the latest version. Insurance stays reasonable, maintenance stays simple, and resale expectations are realistic. For anyone watching the market closely, the Shadow Phantom is the kind of motorcycle that rewards patience. Wait a little longer, spend fewer dollars, and still ride away with something dependable, comfortable, and easy to live with. Number 11, Kawasaki Z900 RS. The Kawasaki Z900 RS is heading toward a sharp price drop by spring 2026, and the signs are already there. What once carried a premium tag for its retro look is now sitting longer on dealer floors and online listings. As newer designs pull attention away, this one is losing urgency, and that is exactly when prices slide. A bike that hovered around $13,000 is expected to settle closer to $10,000, with some listings dipping below that as sellers compete. This motorcycle has a strong visual identity, but that same identity limits its audience. Not everyone wants a classic-styled bike, and that narrower appeal slows demand over time. As more owners rotate out and trade up, the used market fills quickly. When spring inventory builds, price cuts become unavoidable. Dealers would rather move units than hold them, and private sellers usually follow the same trend. There is also a shift in buyer mindset working against it. Riders shopping in this range increasingly want either full modern styling or touring comfort. The Z900 RS sits in between, which makes it easy to overlook unless the price feels right. What makes this drop interesting is that the bike itself still feels solid and satisfying to ride. Nothing about it suddenly becomes worse, only cheaper. That gap between quality and cost is where real value shows up. For anyone willing to wait, the Kawasaki Z900 RS is shaping up to be one of those rare buys where timing matters more than compromise. Number 10, Indian FTR. The Indian FTR is lining up for a serious price slide by spring 2026, and it is happening faster than many expected. This bike launched with a lot of attention, which pushed the price high early on. That early excitement has cooled, and now reality is setting in. Listings are sitting longer, incentives are growing, and sellers are starting to blink. What once felt like a $14,000 motorcycle is likely to fall closer to $11,000, with some deals slipping under that mark as spring approaches. A big reason for this drop is positioning. The FTR does not fit neatly into any single category, which limits repeat buyers. It looks bold and feels special at first glance, but many riders move on after a short ownership cycle. That creates steady used supply, and when supply grows faster than demand, prices fall quickly. Dealers know this model needs motivation to move, and price cuts are the easiest lever to pull. Another factor is ownership cost expectations. Insurance, tires, and general upkeep are not cheap compared to more traditional options. As buyers become more price-aware, they start negotiating harder or waiting longer. By spring 2026, that pressure builds across the market, pushing values down even further. For buyers watching dollars closely, the Indian FTR is shaping up to be a smart wait-it-out purchase. Number 9. Triumph Bonneville Bobber. The Triumph Bonneville Bobber is on track to become surprisingly affordable by spring 2026, mainly because its appeal is very specific. It looks incredible, but it is not a practical choice for a wide range of riders. That narrow audience keeps resale values under pressure, especially once the initial excitement wears off. What once carried a price close to $15,000 is expected to drift toward the low $12,000 range, with some private listings pushing even lower as spring demand levels out. This motorcycle is often bought for emotion rather than logic, and that usually leads to shorter ownership cycles. Many owners enjoy it for a season or two, then move on to something more versatile. When enough of those bikes hit the market at the same time, prices soften fast. Dealers already know the Bobber needs the right buyer, and when that buyer does not show up quickly, discounts follow. Another reason it will get cheaper is comfort expectations. Riders spending this kind of money often want something they can live with every day. The Bobber does not offer that, which limits repeat interest. As newer models arrive and attention shifts, the Bobber becomes a style piece rather than a must-have. Despite all that, it still feels special to own and ride. The build quality feels solid, the presence is undeniable, and it does not lose its charm just because the price drops. By spring 2026, the Triumph Bonneville Bobber is likely to be one of those bikes that looks far more expensive than it actually is. Number 8. Yamaha Bolt. The Yamaha Bolt is quietly sliding into dirt-cheap territory by spring 2026, and it is one of the clearest value drops on this list. This motorcycle has been around long enough that it no longer feels new, yet it has not gained any collectible status either. That in-between phase is where prices fall the fastest. A bike that once sat near $9,000 is expected to settle closer to $7,000, with plenty of room for negotiation once spring listings stack up. The Bolt has a straightforward, no-frills personality that some riders love and others pass over. That split response keeps demand soft, especially as newer cruisers offer more features for similar money. As owners trade up or move on, the used market fills quickly, and sellers are forced to price aggressively just to get attention. Another reason the Bolt becomes cheap is predictability. Buyers know exactly what they are getting, and there is no hype left to support higher prices. Insurance stays reasonable, ownership costs are familiar, and resale expectations are modest. What keeps the Bolt interesting is that it still feels solid and dependable, even as the dollar figure shrinks. Nothing about it feels fragile or outdated in a way that matters. By spring 2026, the Yamaha Bolt will become the kind of motorcycle that makes financial sense first and emotional sense second. Number 7. Honda CB1000R. The Honda CB1000R is heading toward a noticeable price correction by spring 2026, largely because it sits in a crowded space that moves fast. This bike launched with a premium feel and a premium tag, but attention has shifted. Newer designs are grabbing the spotlight, and this one is no longer the fresh choice. What once felt like a $14,000 purchase is expected to slide closer to $11,000, with motivated sellers likely going even lower as spring approaches. This motorcycle appeals to riders who care about design and balance, but that group is smaller than it seems. Many buyers in this category chase the newest release, not last season's standout. As that cycle repeats, resale values soften quickly. Dealers are already pricing these more carefully, knowing that holding them too long only means deeper cuts later. Another reason for the drop is perception. The CB1000R feels refined and calm rather than aggressive, which makes it easy to pass over unless the price is right. Even with the falling price, the bike still feels well put together and easy to live with. For riders watching the market closely, the Honda CB1000R is shaping up to be a smart timing play. Number 6. Kawasaki Eliminator. The Kawasaki Eliminator is shaping up to be one of the easiest motorcycles to buy cheap by spring 2026. It entered the market with curiosity rather than urgency, and that matters a lot for pricing. When a bike does not create strong demand early, it rarely holds value later. What started near $8,000 is already showing signs of softening, and by spring it is likely to sit closer to $6,000 as dealers and private sellers push to clear space. This motorcycle attracts new riders, but that audience is extremely price-sensitive. Most buyers shopping here compare monthly payments more than brand loyalty. Once incentives appear and used listings grow, prices slide quickly. The Eliminator also faces pressure from older alternatives that offer similar comfort for even fewer dollars. That comparison alone keeps a ceiling on what sellers can realistically ask. Another factor is how quickly owners move on. Many buyers treat this bike as a short-term step, not a long-term keeper. That leads to fast turnover and a growing pool of low-mileage examples. When spring inventory stacks up, sellers start undercutting each other, and that is when real deals appear. The bike does not lose usefulness, only perceived worth. What makes this drop interesting is that the Eliminator still feels easy and stress-free to live with. All in all, by spring 2026, the Kawasaki Eliminator will become the kind of motorcycle that makes sense purely on dollars. Number 5. BMW R18. The BMW R18 is set up for one of the hardest value drops by spring 2026, mostly because its price never matched its real-world demand. This bike entered the market with a very high asking figure, which limited who could even consider it. That early pricing pushed it close to $25,000, and now the market is correcting itself. As spring approaches, clean examples are expected to fall closer to the high $17,000 range, sometimes lower when sellers want out quickly. This motorcycle attracts attention, but attention does not always turn into sales. Many buyers admire it, then walk away once practicality and ownership costs sink in. That hesitation shows up clearly in resale listings that sit for months. When a bike takes that long to sell, price cuts become inevitable. Dealers already know it moves only when the dollars make sense, and private sellers usually learn the same lesson the hard way. Another reason the R18 will get cheap is turnover. Owners often buy it as a statement piece, not a long-term ride. Once the novelty fades, it goes back on the market. When multiple listings compete for a small pool of buyers, values drop fast. Spring 2026 is likely to bring that exact situation. For buyers with patience and a sharp eye on dollars, the BMW R18 is shaping up to be a serious bargain. Number 4. Yamaha MT-09. The Yamaha MT-09 is moving toward a clear price dip by spring 2026, driven mostly by how fast this segment refreshes itself. What feels current today becomes yesterday's pick very quickly. That cycle hits resale hard, and the MT-09 is right in the middle of it. A motorcycle that commonly sat around $10,000 is expected to settle closer to $8,000 once spring inventory pressure builds. This bike attracts riders who chase excitement and new releases, not long-term ownership. That leads to constant turnover. When owners move on to the next thing, listings pile up and prices soften almost overnight. Dealers respond the same way, preferring quick sales over holding value. As newer versions grab attention, older ones lose leverage fast. Another factor is buyer patience. Shoppers know these bikes drop, so they wait. Waiting forces sellers to adjust expectations, and by spring 2026, that adjustment becomes obvious across the market. Insurance and upkeep expectations also play a role, since buyers at this price point start comparing total cost rather than just performance. Despite the falling numbers, the MT-09 does not suddenly feel less fun or less capable. The riding experience stays intact. What disappears is the inflated pricing that came with demand. That gap creates opportunity for anyone watching closely. By the time spring 2026 arrives, the Yamaha MT-09 is no longer about chasing trends, it is about smart timing. Number 3. Honda Rebel 500. The Honda Rebel 500 is lining up for a noticeable price drop by spring 2026, mostly because of how crowded its space has become. This bike sells well, but volume works against resale once enough of them hit the market. As newer options pull first-time buyers away, used listings start stacking up. What once hovered near $8,000 is expected to slide closer to $6,000, with some sellers going lower just to close a deal. A big reason for this shift is buyer behavior. Many people purchase this motorcycle as a short-term choice, not a long-term commitment. After a year or two, it often goes back up for sale. That steady turnover creates constant supply, and constant supply keeps prices under pressure. By spring 2026, that pressure becomes impossible to ignore. The Rebel 500 also faces internal competition from its own reputation. Buyers know it is easy to live with and easy to resell, which makes them less willing to overpay. When shoppers feel no urgency, they wait. Waiting pushes sellers to adjust expectations, and that is when real discounts appear. Dealers already factor this in, and private sellers usually follow. Even as prices fall, the bike keeps its appeal. It feels approachable, stable, and familiar in a way that never really goes out of style. By spring 2026, the Honda Rebel 500 will become a smart buy for anyone watching their dollars closely. Number 2. Harley-Davidson Street Glide. The Harley-Davidson Street Glide is heading for a major price drop by spring 2026, and it has little to do with quality. It has everything to do with volume and timing. Thousands of these are already on the road, and more keep entering the used market every year. When supply gets this heavy, prices have no choice but to slide. A motorcycle that once carried a tag near $28,000 is expected to drift closer to the low $20,000 range, with private sellers often going lower to move it before riding season peaks. This bike is often bought as a long-term dream purchase, but many owners eventually step away from it. Life changes, storage becomes an issue, or riding time drops. When that happens, the Street Glide goes up for sale, usually with low miles. Another reason prices fall is buyer awareness. Shoppers know these bikes are everywhere, so there is no rush. When urgency disappears, negotiating power shifts completely. Dealers start offering incentives, private sellers cut asking prices, and value drops faster than expected. Insurance and ownership costs also make buyers more careful, which slows demand even more. What makes this situation interesting is that the Street Glide never really loses its presence. It still looks serious, still feels substantial, and still carries that unmistakable identity. The only thing that changes is the number attached to it. By spring 2026, the Harley-Davidson Street Glide will become one of those rare heavyweight bikes where patience pays off. Number 1. Honda Goldwing. The Honda Goldwing is on track to become significantly more affordable by spring 2026, and the timing could not be better for buyers watching dollars. This touring icon has long commanded a premium, often sitting near $30,000, but the used market is beginning to shift. As newer versions arrive and older models cycle out, prices are expected to settle closer to the low $20,000 range, with motivated sellers willing to go even lower for the right deal. This bike has a reputation for comfort and reliability, but those qualities also mean owners tend to hold onto it for years before selling. When they do, the market sees a sudden influx of low-mileage examples, which naturally drives down the price. Another factor is buyer patience. Many shoppers know a Goldwing will hold value, but when they see multiple listings and incentives line up, they can wait and negotiate. That patience forces sellers to adjust, and the gap between the bike's real-world worth and its asking price widens. Insurance and ownership remain predictable, which makes the overall cost more manageable once the initial tag drops. By spring 2026, the Honda Goldwing will likely offer one of the best opportunities to step into a top-tier touring bike without stretching the budget. And with this, we have reached the end of this video. Make sure to like it and subscribe the channel for future upcoming videos.